A series of programs about this planet and what man is doing to it.
I don't think we can sustain current growth trends much beyond, say, the lives of children who are being born today.
I do believe myself that we need growth, and we'll need a lot of growth, because the two-thirds of humanity live in a condition of squalor, which we wouldn't want to remain. And it is only through growth that they can progress.
Over half the world's population is poorly fed. That's simply because they've grown beyond the capability of their land area to support them. We have serious pollution problems in this country because our pollution has grown past the limits of our environment's ability to absorb it. We're at the limits to growth now.
The cornerstone of economic growth is the growth in productivity, or the growth in the manner or the more efficient way in which we do things. Therefore, if we seriously are talking about limiting economic growth, we'll have to do it with a series of laws and rules that so restrict us that we would have created a nightmare society.
For each thing, there is a proper size, an optimum size to accomplish its purpose most effectively. Size is related to function. Behavior is affected by size. As a human being grows, he develops, matures, gains greater control over his functions, learns to perfect his abilities. After about 2 decades, human beings reach an end to growth, sometimes in a most pleasing fashion. But physical completion does not necessarily mean an end to the development of abilities and skills, knowledge and maturity. Some growth is unwanted, harmful, and feared. Resumption of biological growth in a mature individual, growth that proceeds without limit, is what we call cancer. The sizes of most cells are limited. In most cases, the largest cell is no more than 20 times bigger than the smallest cell. The reason is that as a cell grows, its volume expands faster than its surface. Sufficient nutrients no longer can be supplied through the cell walls, and hence a limit to growth. There is a far greater range in sizes among mammals. An elephant is 125,000 times larger than a mouse. But note the change in proportions that the enlargement demands. The elephant's huge legs, necessary to support its bulk. As height and weight are increased, legs must become ever wider until further growth becomes impractical. Elsewhere, however, the limits to size, the limits to growth, are not so clear. The cosmos reaches out some 11 or 12 billion light years, but no one knows if the universe is expanding beyond these frontiers. Yet how can infinity have a limit? Is there a limit to knowledge, to enterprise, imagination, creativity? A limit to the growth of love? A limit to a people's welfare, to their escape from poverty? When we come to economics, there is no agreement today whether there should be limits to growth. How have we come to believe that biggest is best, that standard of living must rise forever to be matched only by rising expectations? Our present-day market system developed slowly, beginning in the 13th century. People in the Middle Ages never thought in terms of advancing themselves, of improving their standard of living, of gain and acquisition. A farmer tilled his lord's land in exchange for food for his family. The nobleman regarded his land as the immutable family estate. To be sure, there were a few adventurers, such as Christopher Columbus, who exclaimed, "Gold is a wonderful thing. Whoever possesses it is master of everything he desires." The concepts of land, labor, and capital, all for rent or sale, evolved slowly. The first explanation of this strange new system came in 1776, when Scottish philosopher Adam Smith published The Wealth of Nations. The wealth to Smith was not gold, but goods consumed by people. Even though a merchant wanted to make unlimited profits, Smith observed, he could not raise his prices too high, lest all his customers shop elsewhere. If a worker demanded too high a wage, he would go unemployed. The chaotic freedom of the capitalist system was regulated by supply and demand, governed by an invisible hand of self-interest and competition. Smith noted the enormous gains in production achieved by division of labor and by expansion of markets through reinvestment of capital. He saw no reason why such growth could not go on indefinitely. Because, said Thomas Malthus, it will be overwhelmed by human population, which grows faster than the production of food and goods. The losers in the race are eliminated by the mass killers: poverty, disease, famine, war, the apocalyptic horsemen curbing overpopulation. In the 19th century, something occurred which neither the optimistic Smith nor the pessimistic Malthus foresaw: the unexpected products of the Industrial Revolution. Dehumanizing things such as child labor and the factory system. But also the capacity to produce food and goods at a faster rate than population expanded. Industrial populations grew to a greater extent than Malthus would have thought possible. His forecast of doom never came to pass. Karl Marx perceived in the capitalist system not the collapse of population, but of the system itself, which would fall because of its exploitation of workers. A new proletarian class would seize power. Capitalism would fall because it must always keep growing in order to maintain profits against competition and rising wages. Ultimately, this growth resulted only in big businesses, monopolies, which crushed Adam Smith's balancing force of competition. Marxist predictions seem to fit reality more closely than those of Malthus. In Russia and later other states of Eastern Europe, capitalism disappeared into socialism. In Germany and Italy, it became submerged in fascism. And even in countries where it prospered, the cycles of boom and bust culminated in the Great Depression of the 1930s. In the United States, President Hoover tried to cure the Depression with the classic prescription of Adam Smith: leave the economy alone and it will get better. Instead, it got worse. England's John Maynard Keynes explained what had gone wrong. Slumps began when conditions discouraged business investment. Retrenchment of business meant unemployment and less consumption, and thus smaller production. The way out of this vicious cycle, Keynes said, was through new investment. If business is not in a position to make such a move, then government must prime the pump until business once again can resume growing. This policy was carried out by the Roosevelt administration. With the demands of World War II came, once again, a full-blast economy. Keynes saw that despite the periodic ups and downs, the steady trend of capitalism was upwards. If this growth continued for another 3 generations, he calculated, by the year 2030, the economics of scarcity would be conquered. For the first time in history, there would be plenty for all. In the United States, the annual gross national product soared above $1 trillion, affording Americans a standard of living and peaks of accomplishment undreamed of even a generation earlier. Economists believed they saw in steady growth the cure-all to the age-old ailments of starvation, disease, ignorance, and poverty. Growth was the passport to the good life. Ecology stems from the same Greek word as economics. However, the two sciences coexisted in complete isolation, studying two separate worlds: economics, the human world; ecology, the science of nature. Ecologists observed that when a population of virtually any life form starts out, it grows slowly at first. Growth accelerates until it approaches the limits of supporting resources: space, sunlight, food, water. Then the population stops growing and goes on in a steady state that is dynamic but does not get larger. A plague of locusts that grows beyond the available resources simply destroys its supporting environment and perishes. The separate and seemingly unrelated worlds of ecology and economics were bridged recently in an unlikely manner by scientists using computers. Management professor Jay Forrester of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology had started out studying the dynamics of industrialized systems. Then he turned to investigate the behavior of another kind of complex system, a city, What makes it grow and decline and stagnate? At the prompting of the Club of Rome, an international group of leading industrialists, scientists, and educators, Forrester's computer model was applied to the world. The findings gained wide publicity in The Limits to Growth, written by a team headed by Professor Dennis Meadows. The basic findings of this controversial book are that human population and industrial growth will come to a screeching halt one way or another within the next century, just about the time that economist Keynes expected the economic millennium of plenty for all. The mechanism that would blast the dreams of economists, said Meadows and his colleagues, is exponential growth. Meadows gave an example of the hard-to-foresee nature of this kind of growth. Suppose you own a pond on which a water lily is growing. The plant doubles in size each day and, if allowed to grow, would cover the pond in 30 days, choking off all other life. You do not become aware of the danger until the lilies cover half the pond. That happens on the 29th day. You have 1 day to save your pond. The problem is that when a danger is perceived in a complex system, it cannot be dealt with immediately. Delay can be fatal, as any driver well knows. There's always delay between perception of danger and the driver's reaction. Then there is further delay before the car responds to his command. The faster a vehicle is going, the longer it takes to change direction or bring it to a stop. Similarly, a population of human beings cannot stop growing overnight. It will keep growing until the number of potential mothers begins to dwindle. The world population is doubling every 35 years. Consumption of iron and energy and industrial output have been doubling about every 10 years. Unless this population and industrial growth is brought under control, the MIT studies show, there would be disaster by the mid-21st century from exhaustion of resources, pollution, or lack of food. After nearly 2 centuries, Malthus, who had been buried so often, was resurrected. The attack on economists' belief in the utility and necessity of growth provoked a spirited defense. United Nations experts accused the limits to growth of underestimating the reserves of coal, oil, and natural gas. New and better methods of exploration, the UN report said, would reveal, as needs arise, far greater deposits, particularly under the seas. Energy sources such as oil shale and tar sands had been ignored. Also, with increasing technology, energy tends to be used more economically, foreshadowing an end to its exponential growth. The longer lives of these non-renewable energy resources would give technology more time to tap such virtually unlimited sources as solar, nuclear fusion, and geothermal energy. These United Nations experts also said the limits to growth people were badly mistaken in believing that other minerals will be used up in the next century. New technologies will enable us for the first time to locate hidden ore deposits and to utilize lower grade ores. Only in the area of freshwater resources do the UN experts see a problem developing for mankind in the decades immediately ahead. Finally, most economists believe that continued economic growth is essential in order to eradicate world poverty. As the standard of living goes up, a greater percentage of the population receives more benefits. Some of these economists pointed to improvements that have begun to appear from industrial investment in developing nations. The director of the African Institute for Economic Development and Planning, however, has pointed out that such foreign investment industry may be of small domestic benefit, turning out goods wanted in developed countries, but useless in satisfying native needs. Growth, says Meadows, exaggerates the gap between the haves and the have-nots. Before the Industrial Revolution, there were no great discrepancies in living standards. By 1850, incomes in industrialized nations were twice as high as they were in the rest of the world. A century later, the ratio was 10 to 1. By 1960, 15 to 1, and may reach 30 to 1 by the end of the century. Meadows believes there would be a better chance to narrow the rich-poor gap by removing the very pressures generated by growth. The trouble is, he says, the idea of a no-growth society is too novel for economic traditionalists. When highways become jammed, we build more highways. When oil reserves are depleted, import oil. If electric power grows short, build more plants and develop nuclear power. People are hungry, buy fertilizer and develop fast-growing strains of wheat. But, says Meadows, there is another strategy. Cut use of autos, use less electric power, have fewer children, limit growth. The expansionist rationale, says Meadows, is based on a belief that man is so intelligent that there really are no problems he cannot solve if he puts his mind to them. A surprising technological suggestion to bypass the limits to resource consumption is offered by space scientists. At the Hayden Planetarium in New York City, astronomer Kenneth Franklin.
Since 1935, nearly 20 million people have watched us simulate the universe. Now we have the universe available to us to control, in a sense, for the first time. We're going to have to use the moon in order to bring some of it back here to the Earth. We're going to have to go to the moon to use techniques of mining that we can't use here on the Earth because it will disturb our biosphere in a way we don't want it to do. We're going to have to go into space with manufacturing processes that we simply cannot do here on the Earth in order to provide materials that we need for our future that are impossible to obtain in any other way. Instead of disturbing our environment, we can use the rest of the solar system. Ultimately, we will be able to go out to the other planets to bring back materials from them that we find that we need here, to go to comets, to go to asteroids, to bring materials back that they have that we might find ourselves someday in short supply. We can do all this when we have the technology to go, and that technology is at hand.
Thus, the two views of our future. In the words of Meadows, technological optimists see only rising life expectancies, more comfortable lives, the advance of human knowledge, and improved wheat strains. Malthusians see only urban ugliness, destruction of the land, extinct species, increasing gaps between rich and poor, and rising populations. Just possibly, there can be a resolution of this double vision of the world. There is increasing consensus that there are limits to the growth of human population. Some economists are beginning to include the quality of life in their calculations, subtracting such minuses as traffic jams and assigning values to the unpaid work of housewives and other such formerly ignored assets. More ecologists are getting interested in economics, those singularly human activities that determine how our species behaves. Both ecology and economics derive from the Greek word oikos, meaning house or place to live. It would seem that both ecologists and economists must come to share a unified view of our home, for obviously it is only one world.